post-16 provision. So from our point of view, we kind of have a couple of different drivers in terms of inclusivity. Yes, we produce our equality and diversity impact measures information, which is all the stuff that you would expect in terms of monitoring who accesses our provisions from different walks of life, from want of a better phrase, whether that's the area they live or their sexual orientation or their religion or whatever. And we set KPIs around how we want to improve or change that narrative, if you like, year on year. So, for example, one thing we always have on there is increasing the number of men into our education, because we are predominantly, I would say, 65% female. Alongside that, we then also have our Gateshead Council focus and all of the strategies that come within that, whether that's our own strategy within learning and skills, but the Thrive agenda within the local authority and the health and wellbeing strategy and the economic development strategy. We look at all of that, and that informs, I suppose, our curriculum intent going forwards and what we need to focus on. And then coupled with things like census information, and our demographics within Gateshead is also how we monitor that participation. What we then
so specifically on that, Melanie, so if you looked at your catchment or your locality and availability, say gender availability, do you then look to get proportionate entry into some of your programs?
Not always. So, for example, we know there are more young men unemployed than young women. So what we will try and do is increase the number of young men we work with. We tend to find that younger women are more resilient when it comes to the jobs market, do part-time working, etc., and a bit more flexible in terms of looking for the types of jobs. So if we're looking at unemployment and getting people into jobs and employability programs, then we focus a lot of that around encouraging young men into it. If we're looking at family learning, for example, very few men participate in our family learning activities. So we have a target to increase that number, but we know we'll never get it to a sort of 50-50 split. That's unrealistic. And bearing in mind that a lot of men don't always participate as fully in the childcare and the education of children as mothers tend to do. So we recognise that actually what we need to do is just increase that by certain percentile points across a particular given year.
Right.
So, but then overarching that, as I said, that we've got that council strategy. So the predominant thing within our local authority at the moment is health and wellbeing. So I suppose we've got two sides to our provision. We've got our community learning provision, but we're also one of the largest local authority providers of apprenticeships in England. So in terms of our community learning, that's very much focused on working with those furthest away from labour markets, furthest away from statutory services. So a lot of our provision is geared towards deprived wards and working with people with deprived postcodes, those with very little or lower levels of education, or those in entry-level jobs that we feel need to or can progress into higher level jobs. What we're also doing, because we need to do our accountability statement for the first time this year for the DFE, and we're very clear about where we sit in the market compared to colleges. We're aware we've got a large successful FE college on our doorstep, and we don't want to compete with them. We can't, but we don't. We're very much taking, I suppose, that hard to reach, that individual that's got more barriers to accessing education than they have. So we'll never go and develop engineering programs. We'll never go and do offshore wind turbines. What we're really about is that sort of entry level, level 1, level 2 sort of qualification.
Melanie, in terms of the LSIP, I guess the LSIP's focused on level 2 and above, explicitly, although it recognises there's progression obviously through the system. What would you be looking for relative to your agenda in terms of the LSIP?
So for me, because I'll be honest with you, LSIPs are a concern from our point of view, because we do feel it could dominate the sort of level 3 and above market and not give those learners that need those entry-level qualifications in order to even think about progressing into level 3. But for us, we need that recognition that for any level 3 job, you've got to have people coming through at those lower levels to be able to support that. So we might not train somebody in, as I say, to be an offshore wind turbine technician, but what we might do is train somebody to work in their office, to answer the telephone calls, to fill customers, or to do their accounts, or, you know, to train their staff. You know, we've got that kind of different slant, so we see us almost as a way of supporting the local community in supporting that higher level skills agenda.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Melanie. And anybody else would like to contribute at all in terms of their experience of measurement? Any themes that people see in terms of access to education or the implications of access to education in the region at all? Melanie?
Sorry, I don't want to dominate the whole thing, but you can tell I'm quite strong on this, or quite vocal on this, I would say. For us at the moment, there's a number of barriers to education. You know, we have a problem with people being able to afford to undertake education, and be able to have the time to undertake an education, and also to be able to retrain in an area that they want to move into. And I know the government have put in lots of plans. Oh, you can do three level 3s, or you can do, you know, a student loan, or whatever it is that you want to move in. But actually, when it comes down to it, if you are working as a, I don't know, a healthcare assistant, and you want to go and train to be a midwife, how do you get the time off work to do that? How do you get the work experience? How do you get access to careers advice to go and support that movement? And then how do you even get it funded? And I think, you know, we are starting to see a little bit of movement with that. I think, you know, very much universities have had, I suppose, been dominant in terms of that. HE and lower level sort of high level qualifications and access into those higher level jobs, but actually we're seeing apprenticeships sort of almost coming up alongside them now. And with the announcement the other day that they're going to be on the UCAS site, apprenticeship as an alternative option, I think is great. But actually, people still do not understand what an apprenticeship is and how that can help them get into a career that they want. Young kids as well as older kids. You know, we speak within our own local authority and we'll say, you can do an apprenticeship. Oh no, I'm too old. And despite that message coming out from us, actually, there isn't a national voice or a local voice on apprenticeships that's strong enough at the moment that's really promoting this as a viable option to their career development.
Right. And thank you, Melanie.
Steve,
Steve,
do you want to come in?
Yeah, hi, guys. My name's Steve Nicholas. From IQMS Learning, we deliver QHSE, Quality Health and Safety Management Systems, and auditor training. So the vast majority of our sales are in auditor training. Now there's 3 main themes for us. We do short courses, so they're qualifications, but they're short courses. And the themes are process and business improvement when it comes to quality, health and well-being when it comes to health and safety management systems. That's ISO 45001. And sustainability and energy when it comes to environment. And we're seeing a surge in individuals, because we effectively sell to business and then we sell to individuals. And we're seeing a surge in individuals coming to us, wanting effectively to prepare themselves in those 3 areas for the upcoming turbulence in the market or whatever. Right. You know, that they want to future-proof themselves by gaining qualifications in one of those 3 areas.
Right.
And without fail, one of the first things they ask for is funding. Now, we know that an auditor qualification and knowledge in management systems is fairly vital to industry, and it cuts across all sectors. But that qualification isn't, it doesn't fall into a funded category. So the best and this conversation has happened time and time again, the best we can offer is to split their payments over a period of time to give them flexible payment options. We can't point them to anybody, any organization that they can get funding for in order to upskill or cross-skill them in any of those three areas.
Right. And where are these people typically coming from, Steve? How would you describe them? Are they, you say they're obviously people who've decided that they're going to take the initiative to upskill themselves. What's the characteristics of these individuals? Are they currently employed, or are they out of the workforce at the moment, or do they come from particular groups? Or
yeah, tend to be employed. There are people who are unemployed and wanted to get back into the workplace, but the vast majority are employed, and they see turbulence, they see risks in their future, and so they're trying to upskill and reskill themselves. So, for example, you work in the food sector, or you work in manufacturing, or you work in retail even, or you work in an environment that's going to have hard times in the future. But for instance, you see the offshore wind farm business going, well, they want to take advantage of that. And if their organization is struggling, there's no way their organization is going to pay for them to upskill and reskill. So they're looking for funding from somewhere else to future-proof themselves, to prepare themselves to become more employable.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
That's very interesting. It's consistent with, I guess, Melanie's comment, isn't it? That says that unless your employer is going to invest in your development and progression, you know, you're almost you're in a trap that says there's going to be limited opportunity for you to afford to find any other way of doing that, and you know, to find the time to do it as well if you're in other employment.
Absolutely. I'd second that, Bob, by saying we've had examples recently of people coming to us and saying that their employers have been quite open with them about the difficulties they're going through. This generally is around energy, to be honest, where they say the prospects of our business lasting the next year, 18 months is you know, up for debate. And so their employers are saying to them, you know, we want to be straight up with you. We want to be honest with you. Things are going to be really difficult for us going forward. But the employer, understandably, they're finding it difficult to make ends meet, can't access the money to help them reskill and upskill. You know, that's obvious. So they are in that catch-22 situation. They know they're in a difficult situation. They know they need to make themselves more employable across a cross-section of industries. They know that, for example, what we offer allows them to do that, but the employer can't afford it. There doesn't seem to be any funding for them, which only leaves them the opportunity to self-fund. And that conversation is fairly routine with us at the moment. People are struggling.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Ivan's got his hand up as well. So
yes, Ivan. Can't see you, Ivan. I can't hear you. But other than that, it's working well.
He's still with us, Ivan.
I'll bring Ivan back in a moment, if I may, Bob.
Yeah,
Can
sure.
we move to the next question? Just build on some of the input from Melanie as well, in terms of what can you actually do? What are the practical things that you can do to actually improve access for groups that are underrepresented in learning programs? Because I think this question sort of implies, and deliberately implies, that learning programs are a way of accessing better jobs. You know, as people come through learning programs, and therefore if they don't get the opportunity to go into learning programs, very similar to what both Melanie and Steve have been saying, if you don't get the opportunity to go through the learning programs, you don't necessarily get access to these better jobs as well. So what can you do practically, and what have organisations done practically to actually manage that? I mean, Steve touched on splitting payments as a pragmatic way of sort of trying to make it accessible, but what other things are out there in terms of being able to actually improve the situation? Melanie?
Yeah, so I think one of the things we've tried to do is retain some of the best practice we developed during COVID with that blended online learning delivery that has helped. And for some of our courses, or the vast majority in the classroom, for some of our courses, we've maintained that that sort of blended approach, really. And that means that, you know, people who do work, or people that have busy lives, are able to log on to that easily, because you're not having to rush home and get your kids' teas. You know, that can be happening in the background while you're logged on and learning. We've always also been quite conscious to try and take our courses into the community and deliver them within very local venues. That causes problems in terms of cost, because obviously you're running probably smaller classes and you're having to pay for venue hire. But we do find generally that we get a good uptake on programs, particularly around things like English and maths. If we take that to a local community centre, for example, who already have groups of people attending that community centre, and we use those the powers of those community leaders to, I suppose, help people navigate that whole learning process, that really does help with them engaging in it. As I said, though, the difficulty comes in, you've got a very low break-even point on a lot of these programs. You know, you need to realize 10 in a class, 12 in a class, 20 in a class to even break even. So taking it local means that your overheads are more, and you don't make profit from your programs. And I think the solution to that only will come when the government finally realise they've got to fund qualifications at the rate it actually costs you to deliver them, and not the rate they think it costs to deliver them.
Okay, thank you, Melanie.
Yeah,
I see Bob.
Bob Simpson's got his hand up as well. Bob,
Yeah.
do you want to come in?
Hi everyone.
Hi Bob.
Hi, morning, Bob.
Hi, I'm Bob. I work at Darlington College. I'm actually from the learning support team. So obviously Melanie's mentioned about sort of FE colleges and stuff, and that's what we are with the education college. So I apologise that I've just sort of come in a bit late to this. But I was asked by the sort of vice principal just to sit in and see what we can do sort of moving forward. With regards to sort of practical things, I mean, you know, like Melanie said, you know, we range from entry level provision to sort of level 3, extended level 3s, and sort of foundation degrees. But we have a lot of low level learners that are bridging this gap into sort of, not to be derogatory, but when they've hit the ceiling and they're a bit sort of like, do we go into, where is that employment gap? And Melanie mentioned about, you know, these jobs that sort of prop up all the other jobs and answering telephones and that sort of thing. And we've sort of buddied up with an organisation called Project Choice. And a lot of learners, sort of majority have education, health and care plans. That sort of seems to be the funding stream by local authority that sort of help with that. But Project Choice are a supported internship organisation that help. Well, they work in partnership with the Darlington Memorial, the NHS hospital in town, and they set aside a mentor that actually works at the hospital, so it can be in any department across the hospital. So the portering team, the car parking team, the maintenance guys, the catering team, and they allow students to dip into each of these areas and have placements with them. So it's over a year. They further their maths and English, their functional skills with them, and they get work experience. And then out of that, they can work on their CV, gain further experience, and then some have been really successful and gained employment from that with the NHS. But there's always that thing at the end of the year, what next? And I think that's a lot of frustration for a lot of learners. Is this is great and stuff, but there's no, it's not like, oh, we'll take 10 learners and out of those learners we'll provide so many jobs for them at the end of it. So there's never really a massive carrot at the end of it where we can sort of potentially say, in terms of measuring, that thing, we can never say, well, 20% of all learners that get a supported internship going off and get employment. And I think that's a struggle at the college at the moment, is getting employers in to sort of say, well, look, yes, I know you want the level 3s and beyond, but these guys here can still offer you a role and trying to get in. And I think that's something that we're working with employers quite a lot at the moment, is to look at that gap, similar to what Melanie's saying there, and see if we can get something on board there. But I would say that's
Bob, can I ask a question at that point? And the question is to you and anybody else on the call, but about how interested employers are in that population you were just describing. Because I would, if I look at the job market in the region, I mean, it's red hot, and post-pandemic, there's more vacancies at an entry level, or the growth in vacancies at an entry level is higher than anywhere else in the country. And everybody we talk to, whether it's across, the care sector or manufacturing or, transport and logistics, highlighting the shortage of people at that level for entry level roles, but which you would hope that those people would have an interest in, being able to widen that pool by helping those people take the next step into employment. But what's your experience of that? Is that are you having to drive that debate, or are they coming to you to ask for help?
From my experience speaking to the exec team, when the sort of tackling employers on this, that they seem just to very much cherry pick. And I don't want to generalize all organizations of cherry picking, but it seems to be because of the amount of sort of people applying for jobs, that they can cherry pick. And I don't know, we're not getting any real sort of will to look at the lower level sort of opportunities. I think that's the biggest. I think,
But Bob, do you feel that those entry level requirements are increasing? I mean, I guess when we look at some of the trends around digital skills and requirements for foundation maths and English, employers tell us that the entry level positions are required to do more than they were, and that's getting increasingly so. And there's a tension, as Bob describes, in the market at the moment, where ideally they want people with good foundation English, maths and digital. Sometimes they don't always get that because the market doesn't necessarily provide that, and it's a hot market, but they're not prepared to compromise if they can avoid it. Are you seeing a change in requirements of those entry level positions?
I don't think they change, no. I don't think I'm best placed to really comment at the same time, to be honest, but I don't know. But I mean, the GCSE, I mean, the amount of learners, I wish I could sort of spout off some sort of statistics and stuff, but we have a lot of learners that, have failed maths and English through secondary school, coming in, still part of their funding means that they have to do a GCSE alongside their level 1s and level 2 programs. And it's really awful sort of seeing some of these learners year after year still not getting the maths and English because this employer demand of you. You've got to get this grade 4, or you've got to get this C grade in GCSE, and it's a real thing. And I'd be interested to sort of, I know Melanie's got a hand up here, so I'd be interested from that sort of learning and skills side of things, if you're experienced the similar stuff with the maths and English stuff and employers' ability to sort of lower that or sort of be a bit more flexible. But yeah, sorry, I don't feel I can really.
Yeah. I mean, no, and we're going to talk about foundational skills next week. So I think I don't want to go too far down that route, but I guess does it disproportionately affect different groups? Because I guess when we're talking about inclusivity, do you see that excludes certain groups from education because of those types of structural issues you just described? Are we seeing an impact? Does it adversely impact particular groups in our society?
Melanie's nodding, so if you want to come in.
No, I'm not furiously to the whole thing. Yeah,
Ivan's got his hand up as well, so we'll come to you next.
Yeah, I think absolutely on your level, Bob, in terms of the supported internships, we run our programs here, and after that has finished, there is very little then practical routes into employment. I mean, we have a Gates team, which is about helping employers job carve positions for those students with learning disabilities, but they tend to be in quite stereotypical areas, such as working in a cafe or cleaning in the supermarket or meter and greeter at Asda. You know, what we're not seeing is employers really embracing some of the more technical skills that students with learning disabilities have. And I think, you know, when Remploy sort of disappeared out of the market, we were left with a huge gap, especially for students with autism who have very good analytical skills and coding skills, etc. So there is a real problem with that. I think one of the difficulties we see is that, yes, entry-level jobs are asking for people to have skills and qualifications that are not entry level, they're above entry level. So they're saying, okay, we want a business administrator, and actually you must have a level 3 business administration qualification plus your English and Maths GCSE grade C and above. Well, why? Are they going to do Pythagoras? Are they going to be writing an essay for you? Actually, what you should be saying is, we need somebody that can operate a spreadsheet accurately, or we need somebody that can take minutes in a meeting. Those are the skills you want. You don't need a GCSE to do that. Now, you know, we have a really successful functional skills department here, and I absolutely do see the importance of functional skills and GCSE qualifications. But when people are designing these entry-level jobs, what they're not really considering is, what type of person am I looking for, and what are those individual skills that I need them to bring into this workforce? They're just putting a blanket GCSE functional skill level on there. Interestingly, Gateshead Council have just started to become one of a number of anchor institutions within the area, and one of the things we're trying to do is look at employing the person rather than advertising the job. So we're looking at individuals that have skills and talents, and we're then fitting them into our organisation. And it could well be that that individual works across a number of departments because they have a number of skills in a number of areas. But actually then what you're doing is utilising a person's skills and talents rather than forcing a square peg into a round hole, which is what we do when we say somebody has to have this to do this job. So, for example, my job was advertised, you've got to have a degree. Well, I'm not being funny, but actually, to be a principal of a college, you don't need a degree. You need business acumen, you need people management, you need budget management. You don't need a degree to do any of that. So why are we asking for that? Why have we got this elitist system that insists qualifications are the be all and end all of something? Sorry, rant over. I'll let somebody else speak.
Okay, Ivan.
Thanks, Melanie. Ivan.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Thanks,
right,
Ivan.
right. Can I extend Melanie's rant then with my own? No, I profusely agree with what Melanie's saying, and I saw it's a bit disjointed. I've just jumped out of the car onto my phone at a desk now, but I think what I heard came under the conversation with Bob about the project choice, and Melanie took my point there around we have a high proportion that we do get into employment, but it's the type of employment that Melanie was describing. And I think the employers who we do try and talk to, I think feel that they shy away from taking the opportunity. I think they feel it'd be too difficult to do, and they've got other things to focus on. The one, maths and English, absolutely right. I mean, battering young children who have struggled for 3 or 4 years to then batter them again for another 2 years, not only has a demoralizing impact for maths and English, but in the substantive subject that they're studying as well. Sorry, I should have said I'm from Gateshead College. Sorry, Bob, I should have done that straight away. But yeah, I see that when you do try and motivate them to say this is important, and and to keep the focus on their substantive course as well. One general quick point, and I'm going to link this to the digital sector, but I think this could equally apply across other sectors that you will be looking at. I've come to the conclusion I don't believe there is a skills gap in the region. I think it's an employer recruitment issue, not a skills gap. We've got lots of young and adults who want and can develop those skills. Employers have got to rethink how they recruit. And I think that's the Melanie's point around bringing in a pipeline of level 1, level 2s into level 3. The digital sector, particularly which is thriving in Gateshead and the wider Northeast, there's a self-fulfilling prophecy where they say we need coders with 2 years experience, this, that, and the other. Well, all they're doing is moving the existing talent around the region, driving up cost for themselves.
And just on that point, Ivan, just going back to the issue then of inclusivity and access, is that having an adverse effect on any particular groups in society? That approach that they're taking? Because I guess when Bob introduced the session and he talked about the level of representation at different levels in certain sectors, that they're not representative. And are some of these practices impacting the ability of certain groups in society to get into those jobs?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, staying on the example with digital, we have a high proportion of our coders and the computing students who are on the autistic spectrum, quite highly on the autistic spectrum.
Right.
But, and this could then apply into sort of manufacturing, production, where there are very repetitive type processes that these young people or adults would just eat that up all day and will do a fantastic job. But when you talk around, if you put one of those students in a traditional interview, they're going to struggle. Yeah. They're not going to come across, as the Melanie said, the engaging, communicative person. What we try and do is bring employers to us and say, look, go and have a look at their work, go and have a look at how they perform, and that's my point around it's employer recruitment, not a skills gap.
Right.
So to answer your point, Sean, it will alienate, because some people will not perform well in the traditional way of getting into those jobs.
Yeah. And when you describe the recruitment practice, I guess the other aspect to that is, are they taking responsibility, irrespective of it being a skills gap or not, to actually ensure that they get enough candidates? Because things aren't going to change. The labour market's tight, and therefore it's not going to resolve itself. Are they starting to turn the mirror on themselves and say we need to do things differently? Are you seeing any of that?
It's in sporadic cases. I mean, a good example I would use, I was talking to Northumbrian Water, and actually they've done a lot of research on gender coding, which is around when they're looking at how they advertise roles, knowing that some wording puts people off, whether it be male, female, or other. So I think it's in pockets, Sean, I would say. And back to your point, I know we've spoken about this before. It's volume of people that we need, not just the ones and twos that we're looking for. And again, employers, I need 10 of these people. No, you need 100. And and again, I think from a recruitment practice, I don't think that's yet embedded.
And tell me, does the nature of the learning, whether it's education and training course or an apprenticeship, impact the access of different groups? Because I guess the employer is involved in the apprentice recruitment process, whereas in the E&T process, the employer takes the person at the end of the process. Is that fair? Is that a fair reflection?
Fairish, that the employers that we work with are involved in the E&T process as well. They come and inform the curriculum. They come and deliver on the curriculum. Where there is rapid changes in technology, digital manufacturing. So
in terms of the selecting the people to come on to the course relative to the people who are going into the apprenticeships, I guess what I'm getting to is if we're not getting enough people into the learning interventions, they're not going to go into the occupational groups, and those underrepresented groups, you're at the front end of the process. So what's the responsibility of the educators to make sure there's a diverse flow of candidates coming through, recognizing that in an apprentice situation it's different than an E&T situation? Any observations on that?
Shall I let someone else jump in? I will jump in though on that. I know Melanie had a hand up.
Thanks, Ivan. I mean, for us, yes, we feel that a lot of students with learning disabilities are disproportionately disadvantaged because of apprenticeship endpoint assessments. They are really quite challenging for some people to achieve. Bearing in mind that you often have to sit in front of a stranger that you've never met, online usually, and talk about what you've done over the last 12 months. So you've got to have, you know, recall skills, analytical skills, reflection skills, as well as then being able to present to a complete stranger. Now, there are some students that can do that very well, and you can coach to do that. But actually, if somebody has a learning disability, that can be really quite challenging for them to achieve, and that puts them off even going on to the apprenticeship programme. Similarly, sometimes there are exams at the end of some, or you need to complete assignments. That's challenging. Now, that doesn't mean to say that person can't do the job, and it doesn't mean to say that they can't understand the rest of the content of an apprenticeship. What they struggle with is that endpoint assessment and how that's been developed. We've seen a decrease in the number of students with learning disabilities undertaking apprenticeships since standards were introduced.
Right.
And that's a real challenge. And what that also does, though, as a consequence, is because employers like to employ young people as apprentices, because obviously there's some advantages with wages and, you know, all of that sort of lower salary and incentives they can get, that again, people with learning disabilities are disadvantaged because they don't have that apprenticeship route to go down. So an employer is employing them on minimum wage, which is often more than somebody that's doing an apprenticeship, and cost effectiveness it comes into it with all employers with that.
And do you see any employers actually having any notion of adverse impact testing, so they're actually aware that they're screening groups out through their process? Do you see it? Do they
I don't
actually
think they're
monitor
aware
that
at all.
all?
No, I don't think they're aware. We don't as a council, so I can't imagine anybody else particularly does.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Can I just just sorry, Mark.
Mark, did you want to come in?
So yeah, just picking up on Ivan's comment around the students with autism and put them in an interview and they struggle. And I was recently with a well-known recruitment agency, and they were saying that they were engaging with a company that didn't want CVs, they didn't want an interview, they wanted an informal chat. I'm just thinking, is that kind of traditional recruitment process fundamentally flawed now? Is which doesn't enable, you know, applicants with behavioural issues, with learning difficulties, with anything, that not getting through that recruitment process because they're sat in the room in front of people and they can't display the best of themselves.
I think employers particularly are going to have to, Mark, revolutionise how they recruit talent and how they support the development of talent through their organisation. And I recognise, you know, it's tough for employers because they want to focus on being productive, being profitable, but there's an incentive there to maintain a flow of talent into that organisation to retain those productivity and profitability measures. But you potentially, and again, like you, I won't name names of organizations, but they elect to not select individuals with certain either academic ability or others, which frankly is illegal, but I know they do it. And that's what we need to change. Otherwise, businesses are cutting themselves off from a wealth of talent that exists in the region.
So just moving on a little bit, because I guess I'm conscious of the time, and we've covered around the four first questions. I'm interested in what's the most effective way of dealing with some of this. We've talked a little bit about employers and what they need to do, and we'll get to that, because I think part of the NELSIP process, I think, assumes that this is systemic, and there's issues in all places in terms of aligning skills and capability to requirements. But from your own experiences, what have you found that's most effective to actually improve the level? What are the most effective things you've done to improve the access to education? And anything you can share would be helpful.
Cool, Melanie.
So one thing that we haven't yet developed, but we're about to start developing, is using the sort of traineeship study program model for young people and applying that to adults, because we feel that young people have a lot of opportunities generally available to them. You know, you go and do your work placement and you've got non-regulated non-regulated courses you can do, qualifications you can do. But actually adults don't always have that same access. And yes, if they're unemployed, then go to the job centre and do a sector-based work academy, but the restrictions on what that has to be and look like, and there has to be a job at the end, is actually really quite challenging to put together from a provider point of view. So what we're trying to do is look at a program that mirrors the traineeship study program for adults, that gives them a range of skills, a range of work experiences across a range of organisations within their borough, that can help them develop those skills. What we're trying to look at most importantly is how we do that for people that are already employed, because I think that's a sticky wicket. There's quite a lot of people who are unemployed that can get access to the help and support and the education they need because they have the time during the day to be able to do that. But actually, if you've got a job, it's very difficult to move to another job, it's particularly in another sector, and gain all those skills you need. So that's what we're looking at.
So,
but
so that's very similar to what
that.
Steve identified earlier, isn't it? I mean, so that was that person who could see the writing on the wall and was trying to reskill themselves for new opportunities.
Yeah.
But was presently employed. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Melanie.
Ivan.
So what we found is talking about the inclusivity issue is role model representation through particularly women in engineering, women in manufacturing. We've got lecturers, we've got students now, and we have our our female engineering teachers go into schools. And actually, if young girls can see that actually there's a female engineering teacher, we've seen our representation on engineering courses increase significantly. I say significantly, that instead of having 1, we've now got 10. You know, it's that sort of number. It's still very, very low. But I think, you know, we can have a much longer debate, I'm sure you will, on independent career advice and guidance and how far down the education chain that goes. Because I sometimes think once likes of Melanie, myself, Bob maybe as well, once you get young, I was talk about young people at 16, 17, you know, their minds have been already either blocked off from going down a particular route, or that's the only way I can go. So, I mean, that's a huge different discussion around advice and guidance. But it definitely works, and also bringing the employers to the students or to the adults is something that we work hard on as well, so that they can start to see what is being trained, what are the skills that are available, and as I say, trying to convince them to try different ways of accessing the talent that's available.
And do you have any insights, Ivan, in terms of do you get any pressure from employers to say we need more diversity coming through as part of our resourcing process? Is that a driver that you see, or is that just something that's not on the agenda either?
I don't think I've ever had that conversation. Just get me someone who could do this is what I want. I think that maybe that's where we are at the moment. Interesting, you know, some of the discussions we're having, and Melanie mentioned about sort of EDI strategies and things like that. I think just where we are at the moment and the struggle that employers are having with resource, I think that's off the agenda, frankly.
Right. because when we've talked today, the focus of the discussion has been very much around entry level, giving people access to education, which is clearly an important aspect. But there's also this, if you look across, I think Bob said right in his introduction, if you look across different levels in the different sectors, there's underrepresentation at every level. And that would imply that it's not, as you suggest, it's not a focus, and it's not been a focus.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. You know, and I'm sure others will have views as well. But it's just not on people's radar.
Steve's got his hand up. Steve, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just taking your point, Sean. I think everyone's kind of mentioned something to do with most of our business is with SMEs, and from the recruitment perspective, an SME, even if they're big enough to have an HR department, or perhaps even more so if they've got an HR department, it's all about speed of access and risk. So if you need a bunch of new people across your business, and I know most of the conversation's been more entry level, which really isn't my experience. But if you need a bunch of people, incomers to your business, the HR department would be tasked with going out and finding those people. And so I think if there's anything that I've taken from what Melanie, Ivan, and Bob have mentioned, is that it's the HR department and their style of outreach and selection that's going to need some work here, because perhaps certainly when I was involved in HR departments, you don't look into things. You don't have time to look into people in the way that Melanie, for instance, has described earlier. You don't have time to look at the individual and how they might fit the placement that you've got. You just say, I've got a placement, and hope that the right caliber of people apply. So perhaps it needs some kind of rethinking from HR departments on how they actually attract that talent, rather than just carry on hoping, putting their job spec up and hoping that the right talent comes along, walks in the door.
Okay.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Melanie, did you want to come in?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to kind of agree with Steve really about that. And I think the challenge is that HR departments led by policy, in all fairness, have tried to be very inclusive in their application process. So, for example, you do not see the name and address of who's applying. You don't see their ethnicity. You don't see, if somebody's got a disability, we guarantee them an interview. We will have all the questions to be the same across everybody. We will have a task that separates people out. That in itself excludes people from that process. So by trying to be inclusive, they've actually gone the wrong way. And I think you're right. What we need is for people to say, actually, what skills and talents do I need in my team? And how can I go and get those skills and talents in? And actually, that might be not having an interview at all. And actually, what you really just look like is, well, show me those skills that you have. I mean, you wouldn't sit down and interview a chef. You would get them to cook you a meal. So why are we doing that to ourselves in getting them to fit into this format that's not working anymore?
Yeah, it's really interesting discussion, I think, because and I'd recognise what you say, Steve, in terms of, it's a big change in terms of processing recruitment for many organisations where they are, trying to manage a volume of applicants, and they have a standardised process for doing that enables them to get to the right caliber candidate in the shortest time frame. But I think we've had a lot of good insight today that says actually, this is quite a complex marketplace of talent out there that is going to need, if you like, more, for want of a better term, more intelligent processing to help people manage their way through it and into employment.
Yeah, Thank you, Bob. Okay, I've got 2 or 3 minutes left. I promise a hard stop on these meetings. Anybody want to raise anything or say anything which we haven't talked about, or haven't covered, or raise an issue at all in terms of any particular area? These are open questions. So, Steve?
Yeah, I just a small point, kind of good news, I think. You guys have talked a lot about entry level, which isn't really my thing. Sort of, I'm a bit further down the career path. But over the last 10 years, what I would say is we had a fight on our hands, and led by the CQI, the Chartered Quality Institute. There's been a real campaign to try and introduce management systems and auditing skills, qualifications, to a younger audience. So 10, 15, 20 years ago, if you went out and you wanted to become an auditor, you were generally at the tail end of your career. So you'd had your experience, and you then decided, I want to become an auditor, use that experience. Now we see audit students in their 20s regularly. And that isn't by luck, that's by a campaign really led by the CQI and other organisations like that. So, and in fact, at a couple of universities in the Middle East, management systems and auditing qualifications are actually on their syllabus, their degree courses, but it's written in to the syllabus of the courses because it's a skill.
Yeah.
Skill that's demanded in the workplace. And the old style of thinking was that you could do the skill at the tail end of your career. Now industry is starting to recognise that if they want process improvement and so on and so forth, you need to consider that at an earlier point in your career. So it's a bit of good news.
It's a bit of good news,
younger people.
Yeah. I also take the point that says it doesn't just happen. Somebody somewhere takes responsibility for putting a plan in place to make it happen as well. I think that's a good point as well, Steve. Great. Okay, well, I'm conscious of the time. I promised to finish at 11. It's 11 o'clock. If you have any more feedback or any observations, please feed them into Mark. We're having these sessions every Friday morning at 10 o'clock, different subject every time, but of course they all interrelate. We touched on foundation skills this morning, and that's the subject we're going to cover. We're also going to talk about career advice as well in a session as well, and Mark's going to put those onto the web in the next day or so you'll be able to access those and be able to enroll on those courses as well. So thank you very much for your time today. As always, appreciate your input. The discussions always vary around, but we get so much out of them, so we do appreciate you taking the time to support the NELSIP planning process, and we hope to see you again in another session. Thank you.
Nice to meet you all. Bye.
Bob, can I ask Bob, can you stay on a minute, Bob?
It's Ivan, Bob. Yeah.
Which?
It's Ivan.
There's 2 Bob.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Bob B.
Oh, Bob B. Okay, all right. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just wanted to check, did Chris send you that more detailed information, Bob, you after?
He hasn't yet, but so if you are talking to him, that'd be great, Ivan. He joined this equivalent call last Friday, and he said he was in Derby, so I didn't know whether he might be dealing with some family stuff or something. So I deliberately had left him alone since.
It was more important than that. He was at a Star Wars convention. So
you've exercised discretion there, haven't you, by telling everybody?
Hey, this is the man who's got a £2,000 stormtrooper outfit in his room. So he's very overt. He's very overt about it. Yeah, I'm seeing him this afternoon when I get back to the office, Bob.
That's
so
great.
I'll chase him up on that, and anything else, just give us a shout. But we'll see you at the next.
While you're on, Ivan, if you're talking to him, because after the session we had last Friday, he touched on some of your insight on digital skills again, and I said it would be great to get a separate call with anybody from Gateshead to get, I think, insight into your digital boot camps in terms of what the experience has been, what's worked well, any lessons learned, but also the broader. You appear to have more understanding of the broader digital kind of marketplace for talent than some of the other colleges, and it would be great just to kind of explore that in a bit more detail as well. I think.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. We can easily set that up, Bob. It's interesting me talking more and more about the boot camp funding model. I think looks like that's here to stay, and actually will be displacing a lot of the adult budget. But I think we're starting to live some CNC boot camps as well,
right,
in the engineering space. So I think it's going to be a type of model that is more attractive to employers for that short 6 to 10 week upskilling, rather than they need to come for an 18-month day release. Yeah, I think the course is always going to be a complementary set and suite of training provision, but I think this one will be more appetizing, I think, to employers to rapidly upskill.
No, it'd be great to get your experience so we can kind of build that in that says, actually, here's a good example of something that's working well, and it could be a model that is leveraged more moving forward. Keen to do that. So.
Yeah, across different. Yeah, just drop me a line. I'd easily set that up between the three of us. That's absolutely fine.
All right, that's great. Thanks.
Thanks.
Have a great
Yeah,
weekend, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.
There.